This is the most unique winemaking method I've ever seen. Several young girls stepped barefoot on the grapes, and then they circled around the container together. With each step, every grape was crushed, its rich purple juice flowing into the wooden barrel through the grooves. When everything was done, all that was left was to patiently wait for the grape juice to ferment naturally. When winter arrived, Hiragi and his friends sat around the house, enjoying their time playing board games. At that moment, Hiragi went next door, and saw a completely different atmosphere. As he got closer, he was stunned to see two dogs fiercely playing a game. Their tense expressions were no less than those of humans in a match. Just as this round was finishing, Rurushi suddenly walked over, seemingly hoping to regain some confidence through the dog's game. Hiragi tried to offer some words of comfort, but it was already too late. Not only was Rurushi shutting herself off, but she didn't have the courage to flip the table either. Then, everyone got ready to play mahjong, something Hiragi excelled at. Facing these beginners, he was quite confident, even though Little Black couldn't fully grasp the rules of mahjong. However, after playing board games for a while, it started to feel unhealthy, so Hiragi introduced bowling. But when he saw the girls' moves, he realized he was the worst player of all. Months of fun passed by, and spring quietly arrived. Hiragi was getting ready to continue farming with the girls, but suddenly an alarm sounded. He thought they had caught a wild girl, but what happened next shocked him. A wyvern suddenly barged into their territory, and seeing its malicious intent, the girls immediately cast defense magic. Though they blocked the wyvern's first attack, the sparks from the clash started a fire in the fields. Facing this sudden crisis, Hiragi had only one thought in his mind: to protect everyone. At that moment, his universal farming tool transformed into a spear. This unexpected change left the two girls stunned, and Hiragi himself was confused. Then, they found the wyvern's body, and after analysis, they concluded that it was most likely a wild one. Hiragi agreed, but was more concerned with whether the wyvern was edible. After learning that it was, that night, Hiragi prepared a feast of dragon meat, dragon ribs, dragon meat, and wyvern tail soup. Everyone enjoyed the meal, but at the same time, shocking news came from the Demon King's castle. The wyvern had been killed instantly. The entire city of the Demon King's castle had to mobilize to handle the wyvern, but Hiragi solved it easily. This powerful display left everyone terrified. The four heavenly kings urgently discussed a countermeasure, but soon, one of them withdrew, leaving only 3 of the heavenly kings. Meanwhile, inside the wyvern's nest, after seeing the entire process of its defeat, the dragonkin decided they must never become enemies of Hiragi. The next day, Hiragi went to the orchard, thinking about the dragon feast from last night that almost lacked flavor, and decided to continue winemaking with the girls. The process was simple: take off their socks, stand in the container, then walk around the pillar, crushing the grapes. However, Elena accidentally got stuck and fell. Despite that, no one blamed her, and to prevent further accidents, Elena suggested they all shout a slogan to keep their steps in sync. The elf girls suddenly came up with the idea of singing. In the past, they would sing while working, so this time, they did the same. Through everyone's combined efforts, 16 barrels of grape juice were successfully extracted. Next, they just had to wait for it to ferment. Watching everyone so happy, the god in the sky finally breathed a sigh of relief. But his daughter, the dragon god, was displeased, because not only had the god sent Hiragi to the death forest, but also gave him a replica of the divine spear. This spear would drain the user's life force, but the god insisted there was no need to worry, because he had already granted Hiragi immense recovery abilities. However, what the dragon god couldn't tolerate was that Hiragi had made his statue into an old man. The next day, while Spider-Mom was weaving a scarf, an alarm suddenly rang. Hiragi thought it was another wyvern attack, but it turned out to be a white-haired loli. She was Rurushi's sister, Laura, who had heard that her sister was being hunted, so she rushed over. However, upon arrival, Laura was shocked to see angels here, and even more so to learn that her sister already had a husband. Hiragi appeared so ordinary, but Rurushi explained that Hiragi was not only the leader of the Hell Wolves, but could easily kill a wyvern. Hearing this, Laura immediately kneeled. At that moment, Hiragi realized that Little Black was actually a wolf. Then, Hiragi prepared a delicious meal for Laura. As compensation, it was the first time Laura had tasted such delicious food, and she decided to stay here, but she needed to go home to prepare. A month later, Laura returned, bringing a maid from the Oni clan, and 2 dairy cows she had selected. Hiragi was very excited about this, because it meant they could now make cream and cheese. Seeing this, Elena fell into deep thought. Everyone else had brought their families, even Little Black and Spider-Mom had their own offspring, but she was alone. So, she immediately found Hiragi and said she would be leaving for a while. A day passed, and she returned with her subordinates. Except for the angels and lizards, there was also a chicken. Since these people joined, Hiragi's life had changed dramatically. The Oni clan maid took care of all the household chores, Elena's subordinates guarded the forest, and the lizards did the heavy labor. Hiragi sighed at how the population was growing, and to his surprise, the elves brought back another lost companion, and this time, they were all female, with not a single male among them. The next day, Hiragi called a meeting with the leaders of all the clans. As the village's population grew, he decided to give it a name. Everyone suggested using the name of the forest, but Hiragi thought Death Village didn't sound right. At that moment, Spider-Mom had an idea and asked Hiragi to open the gate. Hiragi did as she asked, and in front of him stood the great tree from the beginning. He suddenly understood, and decided to name the village Great Tree Village. To celebrate the establishment of the village, Hiragi hosted a grand feast, and just in time, the red wine had fermented perfectly. Amidst the laughter and joy, Hiragi was elected as the village chief. Seeing the happiness on everyone's faces, Hiragi felt truly fulfilled. However, a drunk Elena was not so happy. That day, the Demon King sent an envoy, bringing a generous gift, a universal medicine that could be used both internally and externally. Hiragi misunderstood the intention, thinking the Demon King was here to demand taxes, but as the village chief, how could Hiragi simply back down? He firmly stated, if the Demon King allows us to live here, I will offer 10% of our crops crops as tribute each year. The envoy paused for a moment, then confirmed Hiragi's meaning, and began drafting a contract. The girls praised Hiragi, as paying taxes meant they would have the Demon King's protection, and the rate of just 10% was almost unbelievable. Normally, it would have been at least 50 to 60%, but back at the Demon King's castle, the 4 heavenly kings were stunned. Hiragi, who had the power to kill a wyvern in an instant, had chosen to ally with them. They suspected there might be a hidden agenda, but for now, they could only accept this reality. After all, the village was full of big figures, including a vampire princess, a great sage, and others. Even the envoy was quite powerful. Under these circumstances, how could they dare refuse Hiragi's alliance? Fortunately, the conversation went smoothly, and before leaving, the envoy was given some of the village's local specialties. However, when they opened the gift, they were left speechless. It turned out to be the work of a giant demon spider, whose power was on par with the demon kings of past generations. The next day, Hiragi's village welcomed a giant dragon. His name was Drame, and he told Hiragi his lair was located to the south of the village. Though a bit far, it was still considered a neighbor. Drame lowered his posture, and presented a generous gift. Hiragi was eager to welcome this new guest, but due to Drame's massive size, he couldn't enter the house, so Drame transformed into human form. Although Drame was a bit nervous around Hiragi, after tasting the village's red wine, he became completely hooked, even reluctant to return to his lair. Fortunately, Drame's servant reminded him in time, and he left with his master. Before leaving, Hiragi gave Drame a large bag of apples. After 2 rounds of powerful visitors, Hiragi realized it was time to consider a proper way of receiving guests. To avoid having to stand at the village entrance all the time, he decided to build a dedicated guest reception house, with the elf girls handling the decoration. Additionally, the system for greeting visitors was improved. The angel who was responsible for guiding them would now need to confirm their identity before each visit, to prevent enemies from disguising themselves as guests and infiltrating the village. To ensure this, Hiragi and the spider devised a new secret code. If it was a visitor, they would ring a bell, so it wouldn't be confused with the alarm for enemy attacks. The task of receiving visitors was now a joint effort between Hiragi and the leaders of each clan. To prevent enemies from pretending to be guests, Hiragi assigned Laura the task of surveillance, as she could stay awake for days without rest. With all the preparations in place, the next day's guest reception plan finally came into play. This time, a group of male orcs arrived, coming from a small village to the east. They planned to establish friendly relations with the village, but before Hiragi could speak, Rurushi intervened. She noticed that some of the visitors seemed to be hiding something. Little Black had sensed an ambush at the village entrance, but considering the sincerity in the orcs' apology, Hiragi didn't press further, so they were brought to the newly decorated guest rooms. However, after the visitors left, Elena suddenly locked the door. Seeing Hiragi's confused expression, the angel calmly reminded him, visitors often bring small gifts to show goodwill, but these orcs brought nothing, and secretly set up an ambush, so their treatment couldn't be the same as usual. As for food, the Oni maid only prepared simple meals for them, and the only red wine available was the one Hiragi had fought for, but each person was only allowed 2 cups. Seeing the visitors treated like a treasure, Hiragi couldn't help but ask about their intentions. It turned out, they made a living from hunting and mining, but their trade with human villages had gone sour, and now they were forced to find new partners. Coincidentally, after seeing the Demon King's announcement, they thought it was an opportunity, so they crossed mountains to get here. The ambush was just a precaution, in case of unexpected danger. After a night of conversation, Hiragi was convinced they were trustworthy, and decided to start trade with them. Since the orc village didn't have currency, the trade would be done by bartering, exchanging crops for the orc village's specialties. As for transportation, they hoped Hiragi would send someone. Since the Death Forest was too dangerous, Hiragi agreed without hesitation.